Picture this. You're watching a nature documentary, and suddenly the camera captures something extraordinary. Thousands of sardines moving as one massive, shimmering sphere in the ocean depths. They're not just swimming randomly. They're swarming, clustering around something irresistible. The narrator calls it a bait ball, and as you watch, predators circle, dive, and feed in a chaotic frenzy. Then, just as suddenly as it formed, the sphere dissolves. The fish scatter into the deep, leaving only empty water behind. Now here's the kicker. According to a fascinating new study, this isn't just marine biology. This is exactly what's happening to us every single day on YouTube. We are the fish, the viral videos are the bait balls, and the algorithm? Well, that's the ocean current, herding us all together.
Welcome to Mindcast. I'm Will, and today we're diving deep into one of the most mind-bending papers I've encountered this season. It's called The Epistemic Shoal: Algorithmic Swarming, Participatory Bait Balls, and the Restructuring of Social Knowledge in the Post-Broadcast Era. Now, before your eyes glaze over at that academic title, stick with me, because what this research reveals will completely change how you see every scroll, every click, every moment you spend in our digital ocean. We're going to explore how human attention itself has evolved, how we've gone from being a seated audience watching Walter Cronkite to becoming a swarming shoal of digital fish, clustering around viral content like our lives depend on it. We'll uncover how YouTube's algorithm acts as invisible ocean currents, herding millions of minds into temporary communities that form and dissolve in days. And we'll grapple with what this means for learning, for truth, and for the future of human knowledge itself. This isn't just about social media, folks. This is about nothing less than the transformation of human consciousness in the 21st century.
Let's start with the great paradigm shift that most of us lived through without even realizing it. Think back to the 1980s or 90s. When the evening news came on, something remarkable happened. Millions of people across the country absorbed the exact same information at the exact same time. Walter Cronkite, Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, these weren't just news anchors, they were the architects of a synchronized national consciousness. This was what the researchers call the broadcast era, a world of gatekeepers where information flowed from one to many in a linear, hierarchical system. You had to have massive capital to build a TV station or printing press. Authority was concentrated, vetted, slow. And here's the crucial part. Feedback was high friction. If you disagreed with something, you wrote an angry letter to the editor that took days to mail and process. That delay wasn't a bug, it was a feature. It created what the philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls a pathos of distance, a cooling-off period that filtered raw emotion out of public discourse. But then came the internet, and everything changed. The one-to-many model collapsed into many-to-many. Suddenly, anyone with a smartphone could broadcast to the world. The barriers to entry evaporated. The gatekeepers lost their monopoly. And rather than creating the harmonious global village that early internet utopians promised, what emerged was something far more chaotic, far more volatile: the digital swarm.
Here's where that biological metaphor becomes absolutely crucial. In the broadcast era, audiences were like coral reefs, fixed, structured, fed by the steady currents of network programming. But in the YouTube era, we've become pelagic. We're untethered, mobile, predatory, hunting for content in the open algorithmic ocean. And this fundamentally changes who we are as information consumers. Byung-Chul Han makes a brilliant distinction here between the traditional mass and what he calls the digital swarm. A traditional crowd, think labor union marchers or a political rally, gathers physically and develops what he calls a collective soul, a we that can act decisively. They don't just consume, they organize, they march, they change things. But the digital swarm is composed of isolated individuals staring at screens, incapable of forming that coherent we. We don't march, we swarm. We don't act, we react. We're united not by solidarity, but by fleeting interest. We cluster around a piece of content, our bait ball, generate a flurry of comments, likes, and shares, and then we disperse. This creates what I call simulated solidarity. We feel like we're part of something meaningful, but it lacks the structure and permanence to sustain real action. Think about the last time you got caught up in a viral moment. Maybe it was a political scandal, a celebrity meltdown, or just a really compelling YouTube deep dive. For a few days, it felt like everyone was talking about it. The comments section was on fire, you felt connected to thousands of other people sharing the experience, and then nothing. The algorithm moved on, the shoal dispersed, the moment became digital sediment, buried under the next wave of content.
Now let's talk about the algorithm, because this is where things get really fascinating. The YouTube recommendation system doesn't just reflect our preferences, it actively shapes them. It functions like ocean currents, herding us into interest-based shoals around what the researchers brilliantly call bait balls of content. Here's how it works. YouTube uses two main neural networks. First, there's candidate generation. Think of this as the wide net that filters millions of videos down to a few hundred based on your history and what people like you have watched. Then comes ranking, the specific lure that scores these candidates based on predicted watch time and engagement, serving up the most enthralling options. This creates what I'm calling the bait ball effect. When a topic starts trending, let's say sourdough baking during lockdown or a specific political controversy, the algorithm identifies a cluster of interested users and a cluster of relevant videos. It then feeds the bait to the shoal in a feedback loop. As we click and watch, the algorithm interprets this as a signal to tighten the cluster, pushing more of that specific content to those specific users. The viral life cycle follows a predictable pattern. First, the swarm phase, where exponential growth kicks in as the algorithm detects early engagement signals and boosts content beyond the creator's subscriber base. Then comes the frenzy, 48 to 120 hours, where interaction volume peaks and the content becomes omnipresent. Finally, the dispersion, as the algorithm demands freshness and the novelty signal decays, causing the shoal to scatter toward the next stimulus. What's remarkable is how this mirrors biological feeding frenzies, where predators attack a bait ball from all sides, creating chaos before the formation dissolves.
This brings us to our third key insight, the crisis of learning and truth. Because this shift from broadcast to swarm isn't just changing how we consume media, it's fundamentally rewiring how we learn and what we accept as true. Let's start with learning. In the 20th century, education was built on what researchers call just-in-case learning. You accumulated knowledge in advance, building a robust internal library for potential future use. You read entire books, took comprehensive courses, developed deep expertise in specific domains. But the swarm era has given birth to just-in-time learning, powered by what's called Connectivism. This learning theory argues that in a world where knowledge is growing exponentially, the capacity to know more, to navigate networks and find answers, is more critical than what you currently know. Why memorize how to fix a dishwasher when you can find the perfect tutorial at the moment of need? This has advantages. The shoal can pivot instantly. When new software drops or political events unfold, swarm-generated analysis appears within hours. You're not limited to one teacher's explanation. You can sample dozens of perspectives until one clicks. High-level knowledge that was once locked in ivory towers is now available to anyone with internet access. But here's the concerning flip side. We're increasingly learning by snacking rather than dining. We consume nuggets of information without building structural understanding. The linear chain of thought required for complex reasoning, the kind you get from working through an entire book, is being replaced by the associative jump of the hyperlink. We're developing what I call the illusion of competence. Watching a master carpenter makes us feel like we can build a table, but we haven't acquired the tacit skills or muscle memory.
Even more troubling is what's happening to truth itself. In the broadcast era, truth was, to a degree, authoritative. It was vetted by institutions and handed down. While this system had its biases, it provided a shared baseline for reality. In the swarm era, truth is negotiated. The bait ball becomes a center of gravity for what researchers call negotiated truth. If a conspiracy theory generates enough viral engagement, it acquires epistemic authority simply through its mass. The algorithm, which is agnostic to truth and sensitive only to engagement, amplifies whatever creates the biggest flurry of activity. This leads to what the study calls epistemic fragmentation. We no longer inhabit a shared world. We inhabit thousands of disconnected interest shoals, each with its own facts, its own experts, its own reality. The community we feel part of is often just a community of confirmation bias, protected by what researchers term the selective permeability of our algorithmic bubbles. Here's the really scary part. The danger of the shoal is that it feels like the ocean, but it's actually just a bubble. When your entire feed is filled with people discussing the same ideas, using the same language, referencing the same sources, it creates a false consensus effect. You think you're seeing the full picture when you're actually trapped in an increasingly narrow epistemic funnel. And this is accelerating. As AI begins to curate and even create content optimized for maximum engagement, we risk what researchers call the loop effect, a self-reinforcing cycle where users become trapped in tighter and tighter circles of algorithmic recommendation, consuming their own ideological tail while convinced they're exploring the world. So where does this leave us? How do we navigate this new reality? Let me offer 3 concrete takeaways that can help you maintain agency in the algorithmic ocean. First, develop algorithmic literacy. Learn to recognize when you're being herded. When you find yourself in the middle of a viral moment, pause and ask, is this a bait ball? Look for the signs: sudden ubiquity, high emotional arousal, the feeling that everyone is talking about something. Remember that virality doesn't equal validity. The biggest bait balls often contain the least nutritious content. Second, practice intentional depth. In a world designed for shallow consumption, going deep becomes a radical act. Pick one topic per month and dive below the surface. Read entire books instead of just summaries. Follow arguments from beginning to end instead of jumping between highlights. Build what I call cognitive anchors, deep knowledge in specific domains that can serve as reference points when evaluating new information. Third, seek diverse currents. The algorithm wants you to keep you in familiar waters, but real learning happens at the boundaries between different knowledge domains. Actively seek out perspectives that challenge your assumptions. Follow thinkers who make you uncomfortable. Join communities built around learning rather than confirmation. Remember, if everyone in your information ecosystem agrees with you, you're probably not in an ecosystem. You're in an echo chamber. Here's what I want you to understand. We're living through a fundamental transformation of human consciousness, and most of us don't even realize it. We've traded the stability and depth of the cathedral, that old broadcast world, for the agility and breadth of the bizarre, our new swarm reality. The advantages are real. We have access to the sum of human knowledge. We can connect instantly with communities of interest around any topic imaginable. We can learn, adapt, and innovate at unprecedented speed. The barriers to entry for sharing ideas have essentially disappeared. But we've also lost something precious: the long view. We're trapped in a perpetual now, reacting to the latest bait ball with intense but fleeting attention. We've sacrificed the capacity for deep, slow contemplation and the we of collective political action. Truth has become a casualty of the engagement metrics. The challenge isn't to return to the broadcast era. That ocean has already flooded the cathedral. Instead, we need to learn to navigate the swarm consciously, We need to develop what I'm calling current awareness, the ability to feel when we're being pushed by algorithmic forces and occasionally choose to swim against them. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do in our hyper-connected world is to disconnect, to sit with a single idea for an extended period, to resist the pull of the next shiny bait ball, to seek out the deep, quiet waters where genuine understanding, rather than mere connection, can emerge.
That's Mindcast for today. I hope this journey into the epistemic shoal has given you some new lenses for understanding our digital moment. The next time you find yourself caught up in a viral phenomenon, remember, you're not just consuming content, you're participating in a new form of human organization that would have been incomprehensible just a generation ago. If this episode resonated with you, here's what I want you to do. Share it, but not in the typical algorithmic way. Instead of just hitting the share button, send it directly to someone you know who would appreciate this perspective. Start a conversation. Create what the researchers call thick connections, rather than thin viral spread. And here's your homework. For the next week, pay attention to your own swarming behavior. Notice when you get pulled into bait balls. Observe how long you stay clustered around trending topics. Experiment with swimming against the current. When the algorithm suggests one type of content, deliberately choose something completely different. Remember, in the age of the algorithmic ocean, consciousness is the ultimate navigation tool. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep swimming toward deeper waters. I'm Will, this has been Mindcast, and I'll see you next episode.